Putin wins if Europe gets tired and divided, and we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. What I feel when I work in Ukraine is basically resignation, not fear, but a sense of fatigue, a sense that this has to stop at some point, because with air alerts, with bomb attacks, with drone attacks, Europe sees that Putin is testing your nerves, is trying to break your morale. Putin doesn't need a military victory because, in a way, he has already lost this war. He thought he would overrun Ukraine in a couple of days and that Ukraine would just be, a vassal state of Russia. It has not, and it has resisted. Breaking Europe is his next goal. So we have to make sure that we remain united, we are not divided, and we don't get tired.
Okay, Barend, how do you assess current European Union role in Russia-Ukraine war in terms of military, economic, and political approaches? And do you believe that Europe will be capable of achieving leading role to replace the US?
For me, it's not about replacing the United States. It's about Europe standing up for its own security. Ukraine is part of that security, and we're in this together. And I really want to stress this again. We are in this together. When I'm in Ukraine, people don't really talk about geopolitics, or they don't even talk about the war. They hardly ever talk about what's going on. They just carry on with their lives. There's a lot of resilience, and they talk about survival, and they talk about how they count on the European Union and on Europe as a whole. So again, for me, it's not about replacing the United States as such.
In your opinion, which steps would be appropriate in terms of political support, in terms of economic support, in terms of etc.? I mean, military, economic, and political support.
Well, unity in this is not a slogan, it's a necessity, and we have acted accordingly within the European Union. The European Union and Europe in a larger sense is now providing more military aid, more financial aid, and also political support to Ukraine as it has ever done before. And if you compare it to what the United States is doing, basically we are buying weapons, ammunition, tanks, what have you, from the United States, and we are supplying it to Ukraine, which is fighting a war for its own security, but also for the security of the whole of Europe. And I do believe that we understand that in Europe. We do believe that there is a strong majority within the European Union even that sees the fight that is going on in Ukraine as a fight for our democracies. So I would say, again, taking you back to your first question, it is not about basically replacing or substituting for the United States. It is basically stepping up our role. And that's what we have to do. That's what we have to continue doing in the next year, as you are entering the 4th year of the full-scale invasion of Russia.
In your view, how to overcome lack of cohesion in European Union?
May I once again stress upon the fact that we have already stepped up our support. 19 sanctions packages were not endorsed by accident, I would say. They were agreed unanimously, and again, by 27 member states. And that, for me, is not weakness. It is resolve. So this unity matters because the consequences of this war do not stop at Ukraine's borders, of course. They also spill over the borders of Ukraine, and they shape our economies, they shape our security, our energy systems, and also the rules that apply to protect Europe as a whole. So what happens in Ukraine will also determine the Europe we pass on to next generations. And I again stress upon the fact that we have endorsed 19 sanctions packages. We have weaned ourselves off Russian energy supply. and our economies are still going strong. Europe is an economic and military powerhouse. We just have to continue increasing our capabilities and our support to Ukraine.
Putin desires that European Union falls apart. Under what circumstances his dream would come true?
Well, Putin wins if Europe gets tired and divided, and we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. What I feel when I work in Ukraine is basically resignation, not fear, but a sense of fatigue, a sense that this has to stop at some point, because with air alerts, with bomb attacks, with drone attacks, Europe sees that Putin is testing your nerves, is breaking, or is trying to break your morale. Putin doesn't need a military victory because, in a way, he has already lost this war. He thought he would overrun Ukraine in a couple of days and that Ukraine would just be, a vassal state of Russia. It has not, and it has resisted. Breaking Europe is his next goal. So we have to make sure that we remain united, we are not divided, and we don't get tired. We remain focused.
In terms of my previous question, I would like to ask you how Europe is preparing for potential war with Russia.
Well, we are, in a way, already at war with Russia. When Russia sends over drones into Poland, into the Baltic states, when Russia cuts critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea, when it poisons dissidents that are residing in the United Kingdom, when it tries to influence democratic and free elections in Romania or Poland, that means that Russia is already waging a hybrid war on Europe. So let's not be dissuaded by that. Undermining us is a reality. And Putin and the Kremlin as a whole are using this hybrid war to destabilize us. Ukraine, on the other hand, is fighting on the battlefields, and it is also showing us what modern warfare looks like. I have to say that in the European Union, we were quite impressed, to say the least, at how Ukraine is resisting the Russian aggression and how modern this warfare has become, because it's, on one hand, not only missiles and drones in Ukraine, it's also lies, cyber attacks, and pressure on our societies, on our democracies. So this is a joint effort, in a way.
But actually, do you believe on the ground war, on the ground Russian war against Europe? Or you only believe in, as you said before, hybrid war? It can be drone war, it can be missile war, it can be, again, hybrid war, political destabilization, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a way, I understand what you're saying, but we shouldn't speculate too much. Putin says he is at war with the West, and he very smartly leaves out the United States now because he's trying to get an economic deal with the United States. But he's waging war against Europe as a whole. Again, he wants to divide us. So let's not make that happen. Let's stay united. But we do not see boots on the ground, Russian boots on the ground, I would say, in the rest of Europe. What we see is him taking great swaths of land in Ukraine and testing Europe's capabilities, Europe's support for Ukraine. That is a different way of waging war.
The fifth article of NATO Charter hasn't been checked yet, and behavior of current administration of White House points out that the article may not work. How can events develop in Europe under such circumstances?
Well, Maxym, I don't
when
go
you
for...
are not sure. When you are not sure, yeah.
Well, there is never any certainty whatsoever. We all thought that Russia would not attack Ukraine, and look what it did nearly 4 years ago. And I don't go for speculations, I go for reality. And security cannot be based on assumptions. Article 5 is ironclad and was once triggered, only once, after 9/11. And Europe must just do the same. We must build our own strength within NATO, and that's what we're doing.
I got you. What is vital for Europe in terms of outcome of the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, when you talk to Ukrainians, and I am in Ukraine very regularly as an ambassador to Unbroken and for my volunteering work, when you talk to Ukrainians, people in schools, people in hospitals, people on the street, basically, their answer is very simple. Their answer is justice and safety. For Europe, it's the same. If this aggression succeeds, then no border is safe. And for me, what counts, again, is you're heading into the 4th year of this full-scale invasion of Ukraine now. And people are, in a way, getting tired of seeing what is happening on the news. And for me, my commitment to Ukraine is raising awareness and keeping Ukraine in the spotlight, showing that our support is still necessary and that you're still fighting for our democracies. So that is my mission for the next year, even though I do remain hopeful that this conflict will come to an end very soon.
According to peace plan, it is being discussed that Ukraine will have become EU member by the 1st of January 2027. Do you believe in this optimistic expectation?
Well, I have to say that 2027 is very ambitious. That is true. But you need ambition to pull off something that is so necessary in a way. And I think the date matters less than the certainty that Ukraine belongs in the European Union. And that belief keeps people going in Ukraine and in Europe. Let's not forget that the EU was born out of the rubble of World War II, and it is and remains a union of peace and of prosperity. And Ukraine has its part in that political project.
But actually, how do you feel political will inside Europe? Because if I'm not mistaken, you are in Brussels now, yeah, and you can understand, and not only understand, you can feel it.
Well, Ukraine is one of the few candidate member states that has, despite the war that is going on, and despite the difficult circumstances you are facing, your administration, your politicians, the people living their everyday lives, it has made huge strides in coming closer to the European Union. A lot of effort has been made to come closer, to align your values to ours, to fight corruption, even though a lot of work remains to be done, but also to make sure that equal values, equal rights are applied to all citizens in Ukraine. There is a lot of work to be done. And again, I say that 2027 is a very ambitious date, but that date can be achieved in my view. And as long as the European Union and our services, our dedication remains untouched.
In your opinion, which date is not optimistic but realistic?
Well, in my view, it is actually, it might come across as being unrealistic, but I do sense that Ukraine is widely seen as a partner that is paying the highest price for Europe's security, and that changes everything. So within the European Union, I think there is a lot of support, and the majority of the people still stand by your side, even though war fatigue is, of course, growing here within the European Union as well.
When it comes to the strongest and to the weakest feature of modern Europe,
Yes.
how could you describe these two features? What is the strongest one and what is the weakest one?
Well, it's in Russia's interest to stop fighting, as the economy in Russia is going down the drain. And despite, again, the difficult circumstances you are facing, people are showing extraordinary resilience in Ukraine. And that is an example to us all. And that is what I witness on the ground every day when I'm in Ukraine. So again, when you talk about weakest and strongest, what I witness on the ground in Ukraine is basically only the strongest of virtues. So I don't see any weakest links, and I fail to see any weak link when we're talking, with this incredible and devastating war of aggression in the context of this. I fail to see that.
Yeah, I understand you when it comes to Ukraine, but as far as Europe is concerned, what can you say?
Well, there will always be member states that have different views on what is going on and what needs to be decided politically. We see that a couple of member states that are closer to Ukraine and to Russia, I would say, in terms of neighboring states, sometimes have divergent views. But again, I take you back to what I've said before. It has been Europe's resolve to endorse 19 sanctions packages. We have done so over the past 4 years, and we will continue to do so. And we will continue to find creative solutions to keep up our support and to stand by the side of Ukraine shoulder to shoulder. And there are ways to overcome, let's say, member states that do not fully endorse what the European Union and what the majority of the European Union is actually decided. But that is also democracy.
Yeah, sure, agree with you. You used to work as a spokesman, European Council president, and you were definitely familiar with EU perception of Ukraine behind the scenes. I would like to ask you, in your view, how has it been changed last 4 years?
Well, let me say this, Maxim. In Ukraine, peace is not a slogan. It's about waking up alive. And that I have witnessed many times when I've come to Ukraine. When you wake up alive in the morning after another drone attack, after another heavy bombing, you value what is most dear to you, and that is the life you lead with the people that love you, that cherish you, that support you. And for me, that is what keeps us going. From what I see as a volunteer, the dominant feeling in Ukraine is not despair, it's determination. Ukraine might be exhausted at some point, but it has not given up. So we cannot afford to give up when you are fighting this war. And yes, perceptions change, and many people say that Ukraine is closer to peace than ever before, and I really hope so, and I really hope that is true. But hope without security is not a plan. This war is, in my view, also no longer about Ukraine. It has become central to Europe's defense and to Europe's security. So if you talk about perception, that is what I'm saying to you. Hope without security is not a plan, and you are central to our defense and our security.
I have a bit, I would say, personal question for you. What do you feel? What do you feel when you cross the border in direction of Europe, and when you cross the border in direction to Ukraine?
It's the easiest thing to do to cross a border. Well, sometimes you have to wait a couple of hours because border checks might take some time. But what I feel when I am in Ukraine is a lot of friendship. And I have, over the past few years, come to meet a lot of people that are doing a lot of good work and that do believe in this fight for freedom and for justice. And for me, I find this very inspiring. What I feel when I cross the border and I come back into the European Union is a sense of loss, actually, because you are showing a resolve that I have not witnessed ever before in my life. So for me, that is very inspiring.
How could you describe your mission in Ukraine?
Well, it's not a mission. it is more a sense of commitment. When I witnessed the devastation and the atrocities, for example, in Bucha and Borodyanka, I did not want to remain passive. I wanted to do something. I wanted not to sit in front of a television in my house and be angry. I just wanted to do things. I wanted to change something, and I wanted to contribute what you're doing in Ukraine. So this is basically not a mission, it's a commitment. And what we're doing with the two aid organizations I work for is something that is very tangible and that makes a difference in people's lives and helps them to believe that you have partners, you have friends, and you have someone standing beside you to help you through this horrific time in your lives.
Tell us a bit broader about your voluntary work in Ukraine.
Well,
What have you been doing? What have you been doing all this time?
I have raised funds basically to help construct a children's pain relief center in Lviv for the unbroken medical ecosystem. A lot of children are or become addicted to painkillers after they have been wounded in either attacks or after they have stepped into a mine. So there was no, or there is still no multidisciplinary pain relief center for children. So we're going to start constructing that as of the new year, and we're going to help a limited amount of young children that are suffering from chronic pain. And so I have raised, in my capacity as volunteer and as ex-spokesperson to the European Council, I have raised funds for that pain relief center. I've also worked with my hands in Ukraine over the past few months because I work for a smaller NGO, a grassroots movement that is called Finest, that is Finnish Estonian based and Ukrainian operated, where we pack medical kits for soldiers at the front, where we teach at local schools. We are weaving camouflage nets. So we're doing very practical things. So I do fundraising on one hand, and I work with my hands on the other hand. And for me, that is my contribution to what you're doing, to this fight for survival and this fight for our democracies. And it is a fight I feel in my veins.
I got you. Barend, first of all, I would like to say you thank you for your support of Ukraine, for your work, and in general for your attitude towards Ukraine and Ukrainian. And for sure, I would like to say you for your time and for this interview.
Thank you. And I wish you all safe holidays and peaceful start of the new year.
Thank you, Barend. Goodbye.